Okay, so welcome to the next video in my series looking at the ACT English exam. It is recommended that you watch each video in my playlist sequentially because we will be building on concepts that we looked at in previous videos in this video here. So just a quick reminder that full detailed notes are available on my website along with questions corresponding to each of my shorter videos. So what we're going to be looking at today is, in my previous video, let's take a step back for a minute. In my previous video, we looked at punctuating longer sentences with the use of a comma. Okay, in this first section of this video, I'm going to show you that there are alternative ways of joining together two independent clauses. So if you look at the two independent clauses we have here, just remember, independent clause, it can stand alone as a self-contained sentence, and it does make sense. So here, independent clause 1, football is the most televised game on earth. Okay, that can stand alone as a sentence by itself. It does make sense. Independent clause 2, tennis is also watched by a large number of people. Okay, again, this can form a self-contained sentence by itself without any further modification. Okay, so in terms of joining these two sentences together, there are different methods by which you can do this. So the first one, because they are both self-contained sentences, you can put independent clause 1, full stop, independent clause 2. Okay, so essentially just splitting these up into two separate sentences. Method number 2, okay, here, rather than using a full stop, we've used a semicolon. Okay, so more often than not, a full stop and a semicolon can be used interchangeably, i.e. anytime you can use a full stop, you could also use a semicolon to separate the two sentences. The reverse isn't true. You can't always use a full stop in place of a semicolon, but more often than not, you will be able to use a semicolon in place of a full stop, as is the case here, i.e. when you're joining together two independent clauses which can form self-contained sentences in their own right. So independent clause 1 is a sentence, independent clause 2 is a sentence, and you can use either a full stop or a semicolon in this case. Okay, method number 3, here you can use a connective. So essentially we're putting the word while in front of independent clause 2. Okay, so now this, while tennis is also watched by a large number of people, that now isn't an independent clause. This doesn't make sense by itself. You couldn't capitalise the W and have a sentence that reads, while tennis is also watched by a large number of people, because the introduction of this word while kind of changes the meaning of this independent clause. This is now a dependent clause because it doesn't make sense by itself. So again, the ordering of the two clauses is the same, but now we've changed our second clause from an independent clause to a dependent clause. If you think back to my previous video, this necessitates the need of a comma. Okay, so if you have an independent clause that precedes a dependent clause, then you do need a comma there, whereas if it's the other way around and you have your dependent clause first, then you don't need a comma. Okay, so that's method number 3, so using a connective to connect together our two independent clauses. So the fourth method that we're going to be looking at is the use of a colon. So it's very similar to the use of a semicolon in this instance, in that our two independent clauses remain untouched. So they're as originally given up here. And all we're going to do is separate the two using a colon. So colon is probably the most versatile piece of punctuation that you will use in the ACT exam. You can use it here to join together two independent clauses. You can also use it to introduce simple concepts and ideas in say, a list. If you click on the link up the top now, we'll go on to look at different uses of the colon as a piece of punctuation. But to summarise, so these are the 4 methods of joining together an independent clause. In your ACT exam, you won't be required to say that one is preferable to another method, but you are required to recognise each of these as legitimate and correct uses of grammar and punctuation. Okay, so we've got using a full stop, using a semicolon. These are interchangeable when you're joining together two independent clauses. Using connectives, so just remember that introduction of a connective here, it actually changes the second independent clause to a dependent clause because this bit here doesn't make sense by itself. And then number 4, using a colon, which is very similar to using a semicolon in that your two independent clauses remain untouched. So we're going to go on to look at further uses of the semicolon, and in order to do so we need to introduce you to a new set of words. So here they are: however, therefore, thus, consequently, finally, nevertheless. And this set of words, they're known as your conjunctive adverbs. So very similar to your coordinating conjunction, these words kind of transition in between two clauses. So if I have a conjunctive adverb, so we're taking the word however now, in the middle of a sentence here, so it's joining together these two clauses. Clause number 1, studying can be very tiresome. Clause number 2, I spend a lot of time reading about punctuation. So here, we're using a conjunctive adverb. So notice this isn't a word like while, which is just a regular connective. This is one of these special words, and we need special punctuation. So in terms of punctuating a conjunctive adverb, you need a semicolon in front and you need a comma afterwards. So this stands true for any one of these words here. So if I replace this word however with the word therefore, then I'd still need the same punctuation here: a semicolon at the front and a comma afterwards. Not only is this the case when you're using one of these conjunctive adverbs here, it's also the case when you're looking at what's known as transitional phrases. So as a result is probably the most common one here. So this reads: studying is very important. As a result, I spend a lot of time reading about punctuation. So here you can see that transitional phase, you can tell by your tone of voice, your inflection within the sentence, almost where the punctuation is going to go. And in terms of that punctuation, it's the same as when you're using a conjunctive adverb: semicolon in front, a comma afterwards. So as was the case when we looked at your coordinating conjunctions, here when we're looking at conjunctive adverbs, you just need to memorize these. So there was that list of 7 words we looked at previously, links up there to the other video. You also need to memorize these 6 words because they necessitate a different use of punctuation. Okay, so very briefly, we're going to go on to look at the other uses of the colon. I'm not talking about the large intestine here. So previously we looked at using a colon to join together two independent clauses. So these are both standalone sentences. They make sense by themselves, but here you can join them together with a colon. Alternatively, another use of the colon is to introduce a list or concept. So if you have a look here, a basic pancake mix consists of 3 ingredients, colon, okay, and then I'm listing out those 3 ingredients, so introducing a list here. And then in the second example, we're introducing a concept. So he got what he worked for. What was it that he worked for? Well, it was a promotion. Okay, so here the only appropriate piece of punctuation to use would be a colon, and that's the same for this case up here as well when you're introducing a list. Thanks very much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more tutoring videos. Remember that full notes and other resources are available on my tutoring website at idktuition.com. And if you'd like me to cover anything in particular, please leave me a message in the comments below or on Twitter at TomDavies32.